Let me just put that right down. Yeah. Just get a little comfortable here. Oh boy, every muscle in my body is sore right now, dude. Had a very productive week in the gym. Alright, so this is August 25th, 2024. If you're wondering why everything looks different, it's because I got a new desk. I don't know, something about this layout just isn't agreeing with me. I might have to move stuff around. So that's why everything looks different. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna have to move stuff around. Give me 1 second. I'm recording this like probably a week or so after the Acolyte was just canceled. I really gotta get used to this, man. I'm over here and then the camera's over here. It's kind of weird. I'm gonna play around with this layout, but I had a lot of thoughts about some of the stuff in the Acolyte, and rather the creative process. Let's just say the creative process behind the Acolyte. And I just had some thoughts. All right. So I have some notes here about some stuff that Leslye Headland said in some interviews and some articles that were out there. And as a creative myself, some of the stuff she said just really bothered me. So let's go ahead and break some of this down. Here's an interview that Leslye Headland had with the Mary Sue. It's like a 29-minute interview, and there's just some stuff in there that I wanted to talk about. It's not all like negative. I'm not going to criticize everything she says. There's a couple of things in here that I actually agree with. So first we have this clip.
And then their personalities are so distinct, because I think that's what happens with sisters as well, twins or not, is just you start to react to my sister and I, my closest in age sister and I are, we're like just over a year is between us, and we almost felt like twins sometimes because we always shared a room and all of that. So much of my personality is like in reaction to hers. So.
And she basically just admits that the sisters are self-inserts of her and her sister, which I'll get to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something.
May cuts her hair, and I'm like, girl, you still got that thing on your forehead. You move your hair. And
they could just move your hair. They could just move, and they'd be like,
huh.
She's like, it's okay. It's interesting. It plays out very interestingly in the next episode.
So in that clip, Leslye Headland admits that it's a plot hole, that May has a tattoo on her forehead that immediately identifies her, yet Soul never sees it, and it's just happenstance that he didn't see the tattoo, right? And just because you point out, or you're like, actually, if you're aware of a plot hole or something that doesn't make sense in your script and you leave it in and you try to cope later on, it's not a good look. Not a good look at all.
I love a Wookiee. They're my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. And I was like, cool, this one's a Jedi. And then he died.
And it was like, off-screen death. The worst kind of death, yeah.
So then she knows that off-screen deaths for characters are taboo, and they're not really, they're kind of frowned upon. People don't like them. But she left one in anyway, and I don't really understand that. It's kind of a goober decision,
So to me, it was not, preserving the surprise was not very important. Like, what was important to me was preserving the character design. That was the thing that I was very concerned about getting out, was, what Manny looked like once you saw him.
So this quote really baffled me. I was trying to find a way to interpret this quote without interpreting it the way I'm about to interpret it, where she says that keeping up Kamir's design, his character design, is more important than the reveal. I don't get what she means by that, other than she really cared about the way he looked over the reveal of who he is, which I don't know why you would care more about what the way a character looks rather than the writing behind the character, but okay. All right. That was her decision. She says something. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. She says something I don't actually disagree with here.
But again, I think like not, nodding your head to something and saying like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. Like Manny's reveal, it's like this is probably what's going to happen. Again, it's not the tease as much as it's the execution. Like, do you know how we're going to do that? Not what are we going to do?
So I agree with her. That the reveal is not necessarily the key to a good story. Having a shocking reveal, Sometimes the spoiler doesn't come from the reveal, it comes from the reaction to the reveal, which is something I wrote in one of my books, in Blur Havoc 3. That was kind of an approach I took with something in that book. I'm not going to talk about it. It's a spoiler, duh. But there was something in that book that, is not necessarily a spoiler, but the way the characters react to this reveal is a spoiler. And I'm more focused on writing something interesting there.
And I think with May and Soul, it's just, well, I'll just put it this way. I don't think Soul is, Soul's a very powerful Jedi. I don't think he's totally in the dark about who's on that ship with him. That's what I'll say.
That's not what you showed us. Soul was 100% in the dark in the show. Based on what we saw, he was 100% in the dark. So I don't know what you mean by that. It kind of comes across as cope, honestly.
There's so many things that people have sent me who work on the show, like so many fan theories that people have sent me that I'm like, yeah, that's exactly correct. Like, I'm not then going to like pivot and be like, no, that's not what happened. Like stuff that people have guessed stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's, if we get a season 2, that is exactly what happened. Yes, you are correct. But to me, I'm like, oh, that's because I did my job, not because I let the secret out. It's like, no, if you're engaging in the story and you're starting to see where it's going, and whether you're excited about that direction or not, that's not my business. That's not my business. But
I agree with what she says, that just because something is predictable or you can see it coming doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, And that's kind of the problem with a lot of TV shows and movies, is that they're so focused on trying not to be predictable that they become incoherent and they don't make any sense. And in all honesty, I would commend her for saying this, but then you look at what the fuck she made, the Acolyte, and you could tell she made certain decisions just to like be shocking and try not to be predictable. That's exactly what she did. She didn't follow her own advice.
You're gonna need to hand that blaster over.
Well, it's mine now.
Well, it's actually the property of the Jedi Order, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist that you hand it over.
That's it for the video. Very quick, but there's something I want to touch upon, and it's Leslye Headland's over-reliance on inspirations. I have a whole list of inspirations that she has quoted in the past here. We have Camille being inspired by Drunken Cat from Come Drink With Me. She said the tone was inspired by Cowboy Bebop, which I don't know how you got to that, because Cowboy Bebop and the Acolyte are miles apart in terms of the tone. The tone is completely different. Then she says the opening scene from episode 1 is inspired by Breaking Bad, which don't know how you got that, but she did. Then she said Soul's fighting style was inspired by Chow Yun Fat from Crouching Tiger. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm sorry. I butchered it. Then she said the lesbian space witches, the Coven, their use of the Force was inspired by the monster from Crimson Peak. I haven't seen it, so I can't tell you if it's accurate or not. And another Crouching Tiger inspiration, the relationship between Camille and Osha was inspired by, oh my goodness, Lo Xiao Lo Xiao Hu and Jin Yu. I don't know. Like I said, I'm butchering the shit out of this. And we all saw this one where she said the entire show was a mixture of Kill Bill and Frozen, which, looking back on it, I can kind of see the Kill Bill influence, but Frozen, don't know about that one. May and as we said earlier, May and Osha's relationship was inspired by her own, like Leslie's own relationship with her sister. And then Camille and Soul's final fight was not only inspired by Duel of the Fates and The Matrix, but they wanted to top Duel of the Fates and The Matrix, which, spoiler alert, they did not. So let me go on a little tangent about inspirations, right? Inspirations are not a bad thing. Just because you were inspired by something doesn't make you like unoriginal or a hack or something, right? Like most things are inspired by other things, right? Like the Doomslayer, right? Okay, wait. Let me start from my own work, right? So, book Alastor, right? In Blur Havoc 3. He is different from Blur Havoc 1 and 2 for reasons I'm not going to get into right now because it's a spoiler. But he's different from Blur Havoc 1 and 2 Alastor. And the main inspiration for him in that book was the Doomslayer, right? And then you look at some interviews with Hugo Martin, and they said the Doomslayer was inspired by RoboCop, right? And then I'm sure you can find some article out there explaining to you what the inspiration of RoboCop was. Like, being inspired isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. It's not even not necessarily. It's just not a bad thing to be inspired by something. But the problem comes where you're inspired by something, but for the most superficial way. You know, in the most superficial way. Let's take a look at the Kill Bill comparison, right? I mean, yeah, you've got this one character who's on this quest for vengeance by killing like a list of people, right? But it's just surface level, you know? It's surface level inspiration. Like I did a little bit of research on the Drunken Cat comparison with Camille. It's surface level, where I read about this character, and the whole idea behind it is that Drunken Cat is this character that's kind of, he plays the fool. He plays the fool and pretends that he's nobody special, but then it's revealed that he's like this Shaolin master or something like that. And it's the most superficial, you know, where it's almost 1-to-1, where Camille plays the fool, but it's revealed he's the master all along, and it's 1-to-1. It's not inspired, you're just copying. As Soulja Boy said, you're copying the whole fucking flow. Let me give you another example of how I was inspired. In Blur Havoc 2, when I was writing the romance between Alastor and Melanie, right? I was inspired by here's something shocking. I was inspired by the relationship between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 specifically that movie, because for all that movie's flaws, the one thing I can confidently say they got right was the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. And hold that thought. I found the notes. I wrote these notes back in 2015. Sheesh. But I wrote some notes. As you could tell, it's not a lot, and it's in light mode. I hate light mode. Windows 11 is a mess, dude. But yeah, I wrote some notes on the romance between Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy. Like, let me read some of them, right? Like, because I wanted to emulate the same kind of dynamic with Alastor and Melanie that Gwen Stacy and Peter have in that movie, right? And what I wrote here is that actions speak louder than words. Like, Spider-Man will like joke around and say stuff, but when push comes to shove in that movie, he always does the thing that like really epitomizes his opinion on something or his stance on something. An obvious one here, actually give the characters screen time together. Because a lot of times you get romances where the characters spend zero time together, and then at the end of the movie they just kiss, and it's like, what the fuck was that about? And then to add on to that, I said make them have fun together, be cute together, let them be a couple on screen. Now here's an important one that I pulled out. Usually with roguish and selfish characters, the actions and comments of their significant other matter far more than anyone else. That's something that I pulled when I was paying attention to one scene, where usually Peter just lets things roll off of him, but whenever Gwen Stacy says something, he listens, he pays attention. The tone in which the character speaks says a lot when the character doesn't say much, right? Which is why sometimes less words is better. The character is most comfortable around their partner. Facts get hard to state when they go against what the character wants for the both of them. It was the scene, but I'm pretty sure it was the scene at the beginning of the movie where Peter wanted to, like, break up with Gwen because he couldn't stop seeing her father, her dead father everywhere. So he was telling the truth. Is like, I can't be with you because I'm, like, breaking a promise that I made to your dad, right? So it was really hard for him to state the truth because it went against what his emotions wanted. He wanted to be with Gwen, but at the same time, he's breaking a promise. Now, this isn't necessarily for Spider-Man per se, but overall, like with roguish characters, I said when a mischievous character known for lack of commitment chooses a person to commit to, they commit deeply. Well, Spider-Man in that movie, he's not necessarily one that is against commitment, but he is one that when he commits to something, he commits aggressively and deeply. And that's something I pulled out of that. Although this is a very small, like, it's not even one page, although this is a small document, this shows you the kind of stuff you got to do as a writer. And I'll get into that later. But this is the stuff you got to do as a writer to pull out the meat from an inspiration. You can't just take an inspiration and just be like, yep, we're just going to do that. No, you got to understand what makes it work. You got to you take a watch, you open it, you look at the gears, inspect the gears, see how it works. Don't just copy it beat for beat. That was fascinating to read. I wrote that almost a decade ago, bro. Now, here's where I kind of summarize what I've noticed about Leslye Headland. She seems like, given her history, she seems like someone who has spent a lot of time around like screenwriters, filmmakers, directors, and she's been taking notes, sure, but she doesn't understand what she's like listening to. Like she has some advice here that's actually I genuinely agree with, but she doesn't seem to understand why that advice exists. You know? Like it's like, hello? Oh, got a text message. That just ruined my entire train of thought. Anyway, she has this information, like general tips and tricks, but she's missing one fundamental question. Why? Why do you do it this way? And as the saying goes, you got to learn you got to learn the rules before you can break the rules. And she doesn't understand why the rules are there. All right? Why is this writing tip here? As I say here, I'm jumping around a bit, but as I say here, I do not doubt Leslye loves film and storytelling, but it's clear from listening to these interviews and reading these articles that she is nowhere near as disciplined as she needs to be in order to write a well-crafted story. She, like, as we saw earlier, she knew of a plot hole in the show. She knew there was a plot hole and just let it be. She just let it be there. As a writer, your job is to iron out wrinkles like that, not to just leave them there and be like, it'll be fine, fuck it. Like, that's not your job. About the whole sister thing, right? There is nothing, I genuinely believe, controversial take, I genuinely believe there is nothing wrong with inserting parts of yourself into a story, right? You know, self-inserts don't really have a great reputation, but the thing is, side tangent, I notice I say the reality is a lot, and I'm trying to change that. So if you ever see me just stop and swallow my words and then say something else, that's probably what happened. But The thing is that you have to pay attention to the line. There is a line that you have to pay attention to so that you make sure you don't cross it and you don't blur it. And that's the difference between you over here and your character and story over there. Because that's something I have to do as a writer, because a lot of my characters are extensions of myself. Even the villains, a lot of the villains have little tidbits of me in there. And you have to like apply things to these characters that make sense for them. So, for example, there is a character I wrote. Her name is Leah Emery, right? She's like old enough to be my mom. That's kind of a plot point actually, but besides the point. Leah Emery is a character that has two little interesting tidbits about her that like are in relation to me. Is that one, she's on the ketogenic diet, which is a diet that I constantly return to. I made a joke about this on Twitter. It's a diet I constantly return to when I get out of shape, right? And then two, she does not like country music. That's the one genre of music I don't like, country music. I can't stand that music, dude. Insert stuff like that to characters that make sense, right? At the very least, insert it into characters where it doesn't conflict with information you know about this character. Like the ketogenic diet, it makes sense for a character like Leia because she's a character that there's... I'm going to get in a little bit into the storyline of these books, but she's a character that's on the run for a good chunk of the series, right? For the good chunk of the trilogy. She's on the run. She's a fugitive, right? So whenever she eats, she needs to eat something that keeps her satisfied for a very long time. And a little bit of nutrition here. You got to avoid things that spike your glycemic index, you know, your glycerin. You got to avoid stuff that spikes your glycerin. And the keto diet, very good for not spiking your glycerin, okay? Like, the thing is, when you spike your... I'm going to just explain this real quick. When you spike your glycerin, you actually end up spiking what is known as the hunger hormone, and it makes you hungry. And that's why when you eat stuff like Chick-fil-A, it makes you instantly want more. So... there you go. Now you know why you keep eating so fucking much. But the problem with Leslye Headland is that she has put too much of herself into these characters. She's put a lot, like with May and Osha, she puts a lot of herself into these two characters. And this is going to sound really fucking weird. But when you pay attention to how much attention each character gets, you'll realize that May is a self-insert for Leslye Headland. Did you notice that May is a much more developed, she's a much more developed and dynamic character than Osha throughout the entire series? She's the one that is willing to commit to things. She's the one willing to take action. She's the one willing to, like, she's the only character. So out of those two characters, she's the one that has a direction that she's going in. But Osha is just a blank slate. And she suddenly has a motive to, like, or she suddenly kills Soul at the end of the series for some reason, when she was a non-committal, like, blank slate, like, amoeba of a character, right? She just existed. But May is albeit she is a horribly written character, she's the one that has a lot more, like, color to her, right? It's very weird that you would make May your self-insert because she's a fucking psychopath, but there it is. And that's also why I think you got to avoid blurring that line between you and the character. Because a lot of times that line gets blurred in the Acolyte, where May starts doing things that don't really make sense for her character. Such as when she decides she's going to turn herself into the Jedi, and then she changes her mind. Why did she change her mind? What happened to turning into the Jedi? Nobody knows. Because she inserted herself into this character way too much. Making the character do things that she would do in the situation, and then remembers, oh wait, yeah, she's a character and she hates the Jedi. Like, it's incongruent. That's why you gotta be really careful about self-inserts. Be very careful. Maybe one day I'll explain why Book Alastor looks like me, but he's not a self-insert. Oh boy, that'll be a fun conversation. Okay, so let's talk about being a disciplined writer. Because there's this like entire concept, this consensus for some reason that writing requires no discipline. There are no rules. As long I saw a lot of these on my Deadpool video. A lot of comments like this on my Deadpool video that sometimes the writing can just go out the window as long as it makes for a fun movie. No, the fuck it can't. Fun is one of those words that people like to act as if it is an objective term when it isn't. Your idea of fun is different from mine. Like I said in the Deadpool video, I thought Deadpool was fun and I enjoyed it. It was funny as hell, and I had a great time. Still a horrible movie. Mahler, I actually listened to the entire EFAP on his opinion on it, and he hated that movie. He did not have any fun with that movie. So it's an entirely subjective, like, unit of measure, I guess. Fun units, right? To just be, like, it's a subjective thing. You can't, objectively say, yeah, this is a fun movie. You can't say that. So the idea that you can sacrifice objective quality for something on the altar of a subjective concept such as fun, shut up. Making all that noise. But that entire concept just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. You can't do that. It's like being a father of 4 and selling your SUV to get a motorcycle when that's your only vehicle. It doesn't make any sense. It objectively makes no sense. But as we saw in that interview, like, she just shrugs off at least 3 different fat plot holes, gigantic, fat, obese plot holes. She just shrugs them off. That is not discipline. It's not. Knowing that there is an issue and there's a big fat hole in your script and you just let it be there. That's not disciplined at all. And as I said before, you gotta know the rules, understand the rules, understand why they are there before you can break them. You can't break the rules if you don't understand why they're there. Some rules you really shouldn't break. You should bend them a little bit. For example, there is this idea of show don't tell, right? Now, something I noticed in a show like CSI. Go back and watch like a CSI episode, right? And you'll notice this. Whenever someone tells their alibi, there's a flashback, right? And it shows you it gives you a visual representation of what their alibi is, right? If you ever see a character give an alibi and you don't see a flashback, that's foreshadowing that something is not right. Okay? That's a good example of breaking the rules for the sake of the story. You got to understand the rules before you can break them. Plain and simple. You got to break in the thing is you got to break the rules for a reason. You can't just break the rules just for the sake of it. You can't do that. And as I said before, a lot of times she breaks the rules for the sake of, like, trying to write an interesting story. Anyway, we're done. It's time to finally bury the Acolyte. It's over. Like, this is the nice little bow on top. We're just setting this little present to the side, and we're never gonna talk about this again. It's gonna be like that one time with your camp counselor that he told you not to talk about. It's gonna be like that. We're not gonna talk about it. Yeah. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And I got nothing else. See ya.